Mindset drives performance, but can you actually change it? On today's episode of the Coaching Podcast, I'm joined by Dr. Meceda, an award-winning speaker who has delivered more than 1,800 sessions across 6 continents. We dive into the art and science of mindset, the secret to lasting habit change, and how leaders can turn difficult conversations into opportunities for growth.
Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, coaching for success in sport and business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
Finding your perfect coach shouldn't feel like a guessing game. Meet Sam, the AI that matches you with a coach who truly gets you. Your goals, values, personality, all aligned. Discover your perfect match at trysam.ai. Rise above the storm and you will find the sunshine. Now, this quote, Eve, let me just tell you, was on a T-shirt from a cafe owner in the middle of Portugal. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was the perfect way to start the new season of the Coaching Podcast, season 8. Dr. Meceda, it's great to have you on the show. So welcome. And what does that quote spark for you?
The totally honest answer as a road warrior is thinking about all the times I've taken off from somewhere and you're in the clouds. And then, of course, you cross the clouds and the sun is still up there. So all of my fellow road warriors out there will, I think, probably recognize that. I mean, the thing that it makes me think about from a non-literal and more metaphorical sense is I suspect exactly what it's intended to do, which is a reminder that, as tough as any moment, situation, whatever it might be, there is still awesomeness out there, and your job is to get through whatever the particular challenge is that's clouding your vision and get to the sunshine, which is still there, light at the end of the tunnel, basically.
Yeah. So what a great segue to talk about difficult conversations. I know it's one of your hot topics that you love to discuss. And of course, we're both fellow Vistage speakers. And I did reach out to you. I'm very inspired to meet other great speakers in the Vistage world. So let's just unpack it first. Like, when we're talking about a difficult conversation, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
And how does that differ from conflict, or does it, in the workplace?
So let me back up just a little bit in terms of how I even came to be interested in the concept of difficult conversations, because there's a little bit of a path there that might be helpful to understand. So I have spent many, many years talking to Vistage leaders and other leaders around the world on the topic of mindset. So growth mindset, fixed mindset. Many folks at this point, which is awesome, are familiar with Carol Dweck's work, although there's so much more to get into there. And when I talk to leaders about that, I have one section of the conversation that is about feedback, because feedback is enormously important to growth mindset, and it's a struggle for so many of us. When I ask leaders to self-assess on the 6 behaviors of fixed mindset, one of the top 2 scores is always fear feedback. And that's why we do a deep dive on feedback, how to receive it better. Give it better first, because if we give it better, people tend to take it better. So give feedback better and receive it better from a growth mindset perspective. So been talking about feedback and mindset for a lot of years. And at the end of many of those conversations, we do a rapid recall. So we go around the room and we say, okay, what's your big takeaway? What's the one thing you're going to remember and implement? And so often some element of the feedback conversation is what people highlight for themselves and for others. And I realized at a certain point that there was just so much more to talk about in this space, but we only had so much time because it was a mindset conversation. Feedback was one part of that. And so I just really wanted to expand that conversation. And then I came across a book, and I've got like an enormous stack of books next to me. We have a little show and tell situation if we want here. So a number of years ago, I stumbled across essentially a book called Difficult Conversations. It's got a shiny title there by Stone, Patton, and Heen. They're 3 members of the Harvard Negotiation Project. So they got serious research chops and decades of experience of putting stuff into practice in real organizations. And you can tell by the number of sticky notes that I have on here as I was putting the session together. There's just so much fantastic stuff in here. So that for me really was the opportunity to expand that feedback conversation. Because I think about difficult conversations is a pie, and feedback is one slice of that pie, but there's so many other conversations that can be hard that have nothing to do with feedback. So I think, conflict is probably one of those conversations as well, but there are just some things that maybe are inherently difficult to talk about, or ways that things can go off the rails in a conversation, even if it doesn't inherently have anything that needs to be problematic or uncomfortable. There are just a lot of ways that things can go off the rails. So it was basically expanding out a conversation from feedback into all of the other ways that things can go off the rails as humans, and how we understand that and then prevent it or get things back on track.
So how often do you think feedback, like what's your take on performance reviews, and how often leaders need to be giving feedback? What's the balance, or is there?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. So if we go back to a former life for me, so I spent the first half of my career working for an organization, used to be called Corporate Executive Board, CEB. They eventually got bought by Gartner, which is probably a name that many organizations will recognize now. So big research and consulting firm. And one of the big studies that we did one year, big quantitative studies around the world, was on performance management. So we looked at, of all the things you can do in an organization just to try to get people to perform at their absolute best, what works and what doesn't. We had 106 variables that we looked at. So imagine a bar chart that did have 106 bars, which is bananas. The number one driver of performance, the thing that increased performance more than anything else that we looked at, was fair and accurate informal feedback. Fair and accurate informal feedback. I call it the TSA approach to feedback. If you see something, say something, and sooner rather than later. People who are consistently getting that kind of feedback, fair and accurate informal feedback, are outperforming people who are not getting it by 39.1%. I mean, that was a stupid large impact on performance just based on one factor alone, because we controlled for everything else. So that is always where I want to start the conversation with people about feedback. We get really kind of concerned about the performance reviews and how we do that and how often and what does it look like in 360s. But at the end of the day, the number one driver of performance, catch people doing stuff right, catch people doing stuff wrong. And the informal feedback was basically everything outside of the formal performance review. So, I mean, we looked at formal performance reviews as well. They were way lower down in terms of their impact. And that is even sort of assuming that they're done well, which they really often aren't. My encouragement to organizations is always, there are reasons sometimes, I think, to do formal performance reviews for compliance and, CYA and various other things there, but that's not where the actual performance value is. It's in the day-to-day stuff and for the record, it's praise and feedback, praise and criticism. We sometimes forget that praise is a form of feedback too. So catch people doing stuff right, catch people doing stuff wrong. That's the beauty.
What do you think of the sandwich effect?
So this is one of the things that comes up a lot, because in the mindset sessions, I have a section where I walk leaders through an opportunity to identify their own feedback preferences. So when you're receiving feedback, what do you like? What do you prefer? Most leaders have never thought about that. Everybody thinks like, I don't have any preferences. And then we get to the end and everybody's got this huge list of things they like and hate. So everybody does have them. And one of the things I talk about in there is like, what percentage or proportion of praise versus criticism do you prefer? And there is enormous variation in this. Some people actually really like the sandwich, right? Praise, criticism, praise. Works great. Other people detest it with the white hot intensity of 1,000 suns. Some people actually don't like praise at all. It skeeves them out, makes them super uncomfortable. They said, I just want constructive criticism. Tell me what I messed up. Tell me what to do better. Save the praise for somebody who cares. And when I first started hearing that years ago, I was like, that's not real. It is so true. Some people really don't like it at all. So I find that it is highly, highly, highly individual. And there's just no substitute for identifying your own preferences. And if you're a leader, asking people who you have the opportunity to give feedback to on any kind of regular basis what their preferences are.
Well, you're singing to the philosophy of why we do the coaching podcast because, at the end of the day, great coaches individualize their leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And that just knowing, how do you like to receive feedback? That question is so simple yet so powerful. So let's go to fixed versus growth mindset.
Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned plenty of people have heard of Carol Dweck, and shout out to the amazing work that she did so long ago. Give us just a quick recap, even for those who know it. It's a great way to kick off this topic.
Yeah, for sure. So mindset is basically your beliefs about how the world works and most importantly, how people work. And for each of the mindset, there's a belief, very different belief that leads to different behaviors that leads to different outcomes. So in fixed mindset, the less awesome one, kind of obviously based on the name, the belief is intelligence and skills are inherent traits. You either have them or you don't. Life's a genetic card game. You get the cards you get. Your job is to play to those strengths because that's what you got to work with. That leads to 6 really unfortunate behaviors. The first is trying to prove that you got the best card in the deck, which is the smart card. So your job is basically to prove yourself. When you think that's what you have to do, and everybody else is doing the same thing, you're just trying to play the game better than everybody else. There are a number of behaviors we see as a result of that. Avoiding challenges. You want to figure out what you're good at, stay in the box. Giving up easily. If I do step out and try something and fail, I'm right back in the box. Disdaining effort. Effort is kind of for suckers who didn't get good cards, and that's not me. Another big one, fear feedback. I mentioned that earlier. That's a huge one because my job is to prove myself. I'm not interested in anything that says you're less than perfect because that by definition means you failed. And then last one is resent others. So it's very much a scarcity rather than abundance mindset. There's only so much order to go around. If you have more, I have less. That's not good. We see a lot of really unhealthy types of competitiveness in that space as well, which is not great. And all of that leads to a performance curve that looks like figure out my strengths, the good cards I was dealt, play to those strengths, get to a certain point, get scared and plateau. So get to the point where I know I can reliably nail it every time and then stay there. So that's fixed mindset. The way better one is growth mindset. Fundamental belief is different, which is intelligence and skills are largely a result of learning and effort. So it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And how you finish largely up to you as a result of how hard you're willing to work and how much you're willing to learn. Leads to a really different set of behaviors, which is I'm not trying to prove myself or look smart. My number one job is to learn as much as I can, grow as much as I can, which means we basically have the other opposite 5 behaviors. We love challenges. We embrace effort. Let's see, keep trying. Of course, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Leverage feedback and then be inspired by others. And what we see in terms of performance is not play to my strengths, get to a certain point, get scared and plateau. It's instead whatever I choose to focus on, try, stretch, challenge, fail, learn from it, come back better. Challenge, stretch, fail, learn from it, come back better. So it's basically this jagged upward curve. I call it fail better each time in pursuit of awesome. So
that could be the tagline for this episode.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's something I've used in my own life for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for clarifying that. As a leader, you're seeing some of these fixed mindset behaviors coming up. Mm-hmm. So what do you do about it?
Yeah. Well, first question is, are you seeing them in yourselves? Are you seeing it in other people? So, because I can have either of those conversations. So depending upon where we want to start, which one you want? You want to start with when leaders see it in themselves or maybe don't see it in themselves, or we want to talk about everybody else in the organization? What's your preference?
Self-awareness.
Yeah. So I will tell you, I've been teaching mindset for more than a decade at this point, and the way I teach it now is really differently than when I started.
So what's
And
changed?
yeah, so initially, my thought was, okay, we're all going to tackle our own fixed mindset as leaders head on. Let's just start with that. And nobody wanted to have anything to do with that conversation. And so at a certain point, I was like, well, I know leaders are really concerned about the fixed mindsets of their people. So maybe I'll start with their people first. But at a certain point, I realized like, I, as a leader, don't have any business helping anybody else with their mindset if I'm not getting my own mindset house in order. So I've come back to starting with leaders, but I begin the conversation by asking them to think about somebody who makes them angry, frustrated, upset, or irritated. And they make a note of who that person is. And then I say, basically, my suspicion is you will recognize fixed mindset in this person. And then I go through the description of fixed mindset, and everyone in the room is like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly that person. And once people realize, oh, yeah, fixed mindset's a real thing, this makes me crazy in people I know, we're bought into the idea that fixed mindset's a real thing. And that gives us a foundation to say, okay, it's easy to recognize in other people. What about in ourselves? Because look, all of us, I'm going to raise my hand here too, all of us struggle with some of these things some of the time. And it's interesting because after I do all that, then the exercise that I do have for leaders is a self-assessment. But I've kind of eased them into the idea of like, yeah, fixed mindset's a real thing. You see it, it causes real problems. And look, we are all on this same journey together. And this is not an us and them situation with you and your people. This is how can we all help each other walk this path that is probably going to be a lifelong journey, I think, for all of us. I've learned over time, if you tee it up in the right way, people are willing to step into that space. But sort of like a full-on frontal assault, especially the deeper somebody is in fixed mindset, the less likely it is to be successful. But look, like all of us struggle with it. I've been working on it for 10 years. I still have runway. That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah. And often it's something just from our childhood that's irrational that sometimes just rears its ugly head, especially when you're tired and you're exhausted and things coming up in ways that are unresourceful. Being able to awareness obviously is everything. But I love that. I also you're showing your humility there as a leader, as a facilitator, as a coach, to say, hey, I went head on, that didn't work, so you're adapting. So Eve, when you put your psychologist hat on and you think about the future as it relates to mindset and why this is so important, what comes up for you?
Yeah. So it's been interesting. I've been talking about mindset for more than a decade now, and mindset has always been hugely important. It's always the right conversation to have. I think there's actually never been a more important time than right now. Historically, I said the reason we're talking about mindset is because it's a huge performance driver. That's the one reason. A couple of months ago, I reached a tipping point and I realized there actually are three reasons. Now, while we got to get a handle on it right now, one is uncertainty. It's the number one pain point I hear from all leaders around really the world. Doesn't matter the geography or the industry. The other is AI. And it's not so much the technology or the business disruption from AI. Again, if I put my psychologist hat on, it is the species or the social disruption that is probably coming next 12, 24 months, certainly 5 years. Let's not even talk about the world's going to look wholly different than it does right now. And I think if you think about the human brain, like the physical human brain that I have in my head, you and everybody else listening, the fully modern human brain evolved on the scene, arrived on the scene about 35,000 years ago, and it hasn't really changed that much since 300,000 years ago. 35,000 years ago, we still had woolly mammoths. We had another 31,000 years of woolly mammoths. So the brain, the hardware that we're all working with evolved for a world that had specific, discrete, immediate physical threats. Don't get killed by the thing trying to kill you. Scarcity and small, tight-knit social groups. The world we live in now is essentially the exact opposite that, and it's going to get even more extreme in terms of further and further away from the hardware that we're dealing with. So here's the thing. We don't have time to update the hardware, the brain, and until we figure out this gene editing thing, which is probably not that far, but I'm not going to be personally beta testing that. So the only option we have is to update the software. And the software is psychology. The software is mindset. And of the two different mindsets, fixed and growth, one of them, growth mindset, is well positioned to be able to handle performance and uncertainty and disruption. I mean, that's what it excels at. The other one, fixed mindset, honestly, I think is just going to crater in face of the things that are coming. And so I think there has never been a more mission critical time to get a handle on this mindset thing anymore. I don't think it's optional. I never thought it was optional, but we are getting to crunch time here, and there's really nowhere to hide. There's no industry, there's no geography where you can kind of get away with fixed mindset anymore. It's coming, and it's coming for all of us.
Probably a great time for us to ask our the only question on the coaching podcast that hasn't changed in over 200 episodes is in 1 to a maximum of 3 words. What do you think makes a great coach?
Okay, let's think here. Okay. So empathy, including a lot of things in that. Courage. Vulnerability.
Okay. Can you share a story or a time in your life, especially as it relates to courage?
When I've been on which side of it, does it matter which side of it? Is it
Nope.
a coaching thing or just any sort of courage story?
Yeah.
Any sort of courage story. Wow. Okay. One of the most recent ones is, can't remember if we talked about this when you and I chatted in person. But I'm 56 now. And back in my 30s, I ran 7 marathons, which sounds insane even to me right now. But it'd been like 17 years, because I'm 56 now, since I ran the last one. I was over in Paris for the Olympics last summer. And as I stood there in the streets of Paris and I watched the Olympic marathoners fly by me, I thought, do I have another one in me? So that was last August, a little over a year ago. So signed up for the Denver Colfax Marathon here in Colorado, which is home. A huge tactical mistake. Don't run a marathon at altitude, even if you live at altitude. So anyone listening, don't do that. Come train here, but run at sea level. But in any event, signed up for that and started training and doing all these things. And I thought, well, it's going to be hard, but I've done this before. It's not going to be, I know what I'm doing. Boy, it is different at 56 than it was at 36 training for this. Boy, there were some dark days on those training runs. You get to the point where every long training run is longer than a half marathon, 14, 16, 18, 20 miles. And there were a lot of runs where I was just crying on the run. And I started to think, I'm not sure I can do this. I only had a 3-part goal: finish in the time allowed unbroken. Like, that was it. I didn't care about time. Finish in the time allowed unbroken. And I started thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to do it. And I reminded myself of something that I tell my leaders in the mindset sessions around embrace effort, which is full preparation, full effort. You did everything you could to prepare, and then it was game day. You left it all on the field. That's all you can ever do. And I realized, because I kind of wanted to just not do it. I wanted to quit. I'm like, I don't think I can do it. Let me just tap out before I do this. And I thought, Eve, your job is to do everything you can to prepare. And on race day, you go out there and you do the best you can. If it's enough, great. If it's not, at least you gave it everything that you had and you lived in the growth mindset space. And what I came to ultimately is kind of my mantra on those long runs was, I would rather fail with courage, fail with honor, than quit from cowardice. So I'd rather fail with honor than quit from cowardice. And it was the only thing, I think, on some of those runs that got me through. Yay. Story has a happy ending, managed to do it just in the time allowed, but did it. But it was really one of the bigger calls to courage. And it was the growth mindset stuff that I teach my leaders that got me through that and got me to the start line that day.
I I like hearing those stories. And this is, let me tell you why. So often we stand in front of others and say, this content is really amazing and you should live and breathe it every day. But even as facilitators ourselves, when we work on ourselves, we're living and breathing what does come up because we are human. And even coming back from Portugal, hiking the Fisherman's Trail up the west coast, no one told us that 80% of the walk would be on soft sand, right? We didn't train on soft sand. And there was, sometimes some of the walks were 20K plus, and you're like, hang on a minute. This is not fun. This is, yes, the scenery's enjoyable, but it was like every other beach. Oh, that's an amazing beach. That's an amazing beach. But the sand. Mm-hmm. And so the inner voice becomes so critical. Mm-hmm. And what we say to ourselves and how we, you've just reframed it. Hey, I want to quit. I don't think I can do this. You're acknowledging the vulnerability of all those honest comments that were coming up for you. And then to be able to go, hey, you know what? Fail with honor. That simple. And not letting that overtake you. Mm-hmm. So that's not easy, is it? Let's just make that statement. And let's really talk about going to habits now. Mm-hmm. Because the voice does say, no, I don't want to get out of bed, or I don't want to do, what I know that I need to do, whatever it might be. How do habits form, mm-hmm. and what role does mindset play in forming a new habit?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, if you do something and it gets you something that you like, you want to do it again. I mean, that's basically it. Whether the thing you do is good for you or bad for you, if it gets you something pleasurable that you like, that you value, that you enjoy, you're likely to do again. I was like, let's see if that works a second time. If it does, third time, fourth time, fifth time. And we know, from our better understanding of neurobiology and those kinds of things now, that basically the more you do something or think something, for the matter, that doesn't have to be a behavior. We can have habitual thoughts just like we have habitual behaviors. It essentially starts to create grooves in our brain, and it becomes easier for those things to fire again. And so the more it happens, the easier it becomes. Easy. So I mean, it's you do something, you get something you like, you try it again, and the more it happens, voila, you have a habit, whether it's serving you well or not. And so I think the beauty of James Clear and the Atomic Habits, which is the work that I base my habits conversation on, is that it really breaks it down into an understanding of all habits, whether they're good habits or bad habits, thought habits or behavior habits, have the same 4 parts, right? And once you understand what the parts are, then you can figure out how to address each of those to either increase a good habit, hopefully, or decrease a bad habit. And anything that has a system that's really easy to understand and easy to apply. Like I like to say, by the end of the conversation around habits, it should seem stupidly obvious. Like if it seems stupidly obvious, I have done my.
So what are the 4 parts?
So 4 parts: cue, craving, response, and reward. So the cue is the trigger, the things that tells your brain, hey, time to do the habit or think the habit if it's a thought habit. Craving is the desire. It's the fuel. It's the gas, the motivation that gets you to actually engage in the habit. The response is the habit itself. So either the habitual behavior or the habitual thought. And then the reward is the payoff. That's the thing you get that you like, that you want again. So the craving, number 2, and the reward, number 4, are related, but they're not the same. The craving is the desire for the reward. The reward is the fulfillment of the craving. So again, all habits have the same 4 parts: good habits, bad habits. And that allows us 4 different ways to get in there to begin to play around with any habit. So 4 laws of habit change, 1 for each of the components of a habit. So if we want to talk about what the 4 laws of habit change are, the first one is make it obvious, right? So you have to make the cue obvious, the trigger. So if you want to drink a liter of water every day, you leave water bottles around everywhere you can see them as a reminder to drink the water, right? A lot of our brain is devoted to visual processing, so visual cues are helpful. You put reminders on your phone or on your watch or whatever it might be. The next one is make it attractive. So you have to make it the craving, appealing, desirable, something you actually want to do. One of the things I've often talked about is what you're trying to do is work out more often. How do you make the workouts more attractive? Well, if you think, oh, the best cardio I can do is running, but in the dark recesses of your heart, you hate running, don't pick running. That's not attractive. That's not appealing. Maybe you like Zumba or cycling or hiking or swimming. Pick that. It's going to be much more attractive, much more appealing to you. The next one is make it easy. So this is for the actual response. You have to make it just stupidly easy. Remove all of the sources of friction from the habit itself, all the excuses you might come up with why you don't want to do it that way. Just take it out of there. Make it really, really easy for yourself to do the thing. If you do want to go for a run every morning, you leave your workout clothes sitting out at the bottom of the bed. That's obvious and easy as well. You don't sign up necessarily for the, fancy yoga studio across town where everybody's 10 times better than you. You find an online course where you can drop and plank at home in the privacy of your own home, kind of thing. Nobody has to know. If you can't do downward dog or touch your toes, it's fine. And the last one, the reward, you have to make it satisfying. And when I work with people on this one, on habits, this is often the biggest challenge. Bad habits are usually super satisfying in the moment. That's why we do it. They're bad for you long term, but they feel great in the short term. They're super rewarding. The problem is good habits tend to be the exact opposite. They're great for you long term, but they kind of suck in the short term. They're not fun, So we got to change the math on that. So and make them rewarding in the moment. So I'll give you an example that I share with my leaders. So one of the habits that I have, I'm good at it now because I figured out how to do it, but wanted to establish is making sure I'm getting all like the vitamins and supplements and those kinds of things that I need every day to live a long, healthy, awesome life. So historically, that was a problem in large part because most of those vitamins and supplements come in these like big honking horse pills, and attempting to swallow those things was not satisfying. That was not good for me. As it turns out, they make all this stuff in gummy form now. So it's like, ooh, vitamin time for some more candy. So it's now super satisfying for me to take those things. So again, changing the math on making good habits satisfying in the short term, I think is really critical.
Yeah.
And usually the biggest challenge.
All of those things are awesome for our sports coaches out there working with athletes. And what about an example of a satisfying reward within the workplace? Someone in charge of a team looking to change a habit. They've done the first few steps, but what are some examples of rewards that could be a bit more meaningful than just praise?
Yeah. I'll tell you one of the things we talk about when I ask leaders to apply this to their people in the organization. I have an exercise where I ask people to think about, imagine that you are a frontline supervisor's boss, and your job is to create an environment where it is obvious, attractive, and easy and satisfying for her to give fair and accurate feedback, which we talked about earlier, to her direct reports. How do you make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying for her to do that? How do you create an environment where, you design the environment for success and the outcomes take care of themselves? And one of the things we talk about in terms of making it satisfying for her to give someone else feedback is talking about, let's make sure we teach everybody in the company how to receive feedback well. Because if I, as a frontline supervisor, give feedback to somebody and they take it terribly, they get super defensive, they're angry, they stomp off, they don't talk to me for it. Like, that is not a satisfying experience for me. But if I teach people in the organization how to receive feedback better, and the next time I give it, it goes well, like, thank you for sharing that with me. I appreciate that. I'm going to go off and have a think about that. Can we cycle back to that, after I've had a chance to think about it? that is such a much more satisfying experience for the person attempting to do the right thing. It's kind of an interesting take on kind of combining some of the mindset elements and the habit elements, and thinking about like what actually would be a better experience for that person in the moment. And then how do we create an environment where that's likely to be what she experiences?
Yeah. Well, the key word there, just environment.
Yeah.
Which takes time to teach the environment that we need so that can happen. That's why we can't rush these things as well, or just have a quick fix Band-Aid approach on teaching someone how to give feedback if people are not going to receive the feedback. It doesn't matter how good their conversation framework is. And of course, I do love that James Clear fabulous line that we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems.
Yeah.
I butchered that. Might have butchered that one, but anyway, we get the idea of the fact that the systems are the environment, which was the point I was alluding to. All right. Yeah. Such an interesting conversation. I love chatting to you about this stuff. So, if you want to make a change, do you change your mindset first and then the behavior, or do you change the behavior first and then the mindset shifts?
Interesting. So when I teach this, I've got a slide that has beliefs, then a little arrow, behaviors, a little arrow, outcomes. So beliefs lead to behaviors, lead to outcomes. And that's the most linear way we can talk about it. In truth, there are arrows between everything. Everything influences everything else. So I think anywhere you want to insert yourself in that process is great. I think sometimes it's a little harder to make a frontal assault on people's beliefs. So sometimes if we can just get them to behave in certain ways, which gets some different outcomes, it's like, oh, actually that is better. We can do a little bit of an end around on the beliefs. But the truth of the matter is anywhere in there is legit. And I'm cool wherever I can get a foot in the door. And it varies, I think, from person to person.
Yeah. Now it's time to finish with our quick rally. So I'll say a word and you complete the sentence with whatever comes to mind for our little rapid fire season 8 mindset challenge. All right. You ready?
Yep, absolutely.
Empower.
Others.
Let go of.
Anything that's not serving you well, or be dragged.
Listen.
Carefully to understand.
On that note, to all our fellow Vistage road warriors out there, and 7 continents from Dr. Eve Meceda here in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. I appreciate your empathy, your courage, your vulnerability. Let's make sure we all prepare and give our best effort so that we fail with honor and let everything else take care of itself. I appreciate having such a growth mindset in this conversation. It's been a joy, and thank you for your mentorship. And I appreciate you. Thanks, Eve.
My pleasure. Great to see you again. Talk to you soon.
And thanks for listening.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and U.S. college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.